I've never heard music in my life. The medical file slipped from my hands like water, paper scattering across the hardwood floor of my father's study. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the letterhead, Stanford Medical Center, Cochlear Implant Program. The date glared back at me, March 15, 2023. 3 months ago. I shouldn't have been in here. Dad's study was off limits, always had been, but I'd been looking for the Wi-Fi password to give my ASL tutor when I noticed the manila folder with my name on it sitting on his mahogany desk. Maya Chin Williams. In bold black letters. My hands trembled as I gathered the scattered documents. Dr. Jennifer Martinez's recommendation letter was on top, and even though I'd been reading lips since I was 4, seeing my name in print made everything feel more real, more devastating. Maya is an excellent candidate for the new generation cochlear implant procedure. At 22, she has the optimal neuroplasticity for adaptation. The risks are minimal, less than 2% chance of complications. I strongly recommend we proceed with surgery as soon as possible. This technology could give her access to the hearing world she's never experienced. Asterisk. The paper shook in my grip. Dr. Martinez had written this in March. It was now June 18th, and my parents had never said a word. I flipped through the other documents with growing horror. Insurance pre-authorization, approved for $127,000. Surgical scheduling, asterisk patient's parents declined procedure on March 22, 2023. Cited concerns about risks despite extensive consultation. Asterisk. Risks. What risks? According to everything I was reading, I was the perfect candidate. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, asterisk staying in the city tonight. Your dinner is in the fridge. Don't wait up. Asterisk. Don't wait up. Like I ever saw them anyway. I'd been living in the guest house behind our Atherton mansion for 2 years now, ever since I graduated from Gallaudet University. They said it was to give me independence, but I knew better. Their friends thought I was doing graduate work in Europe, Barcelona, specifically. Mom had showed me the Facebook posts, all smiles and proud parent performance. Asterisk Maya is having such wonderful experiences abroad. Asterisk. The only experience I was having was isolation in an 800-square-foot prison with a pool view. I photographed every document with shaking fingers. The final page made my stomach drop, an email thread between my parents and Dr. Martinez from last week. Asterisk Dr. Martinez, we appreciate your continued follow-up, but our decision remains final. Maya is doing well with her current situation. We don't see the need to complicate things with surgery. Please close her file. Asterisk. Current situation. Like being deaf was a lifestyle choice instead of something that could potentially be changed. I sank into Dad's leather chair, the same one he sat in during his video calls where he managed his venture capital firm's investments. Millions of dollars flowed through his decisions daily, but he couldn't invest in his own daughter's hearing. The charity gala invitation was pinned to his bulletin board, gold embossed and elegant, asterisk the Bay Area Accessibility Foundation honors Robert and Linda Chin Williams for their outstanding advocacy for the disabled community. Saturday, July 15, 7 p.m. The St. Francis Hotel. Asterisk. Outstanding advocacy. The irony tasted bitter as I stared at their names in flowing script. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new browser window. If my parents wouldn't give me the surgery, I'd find a way to get it myself. I had my trust fund, money Grandma Chin left me that they couldn't touch. It was time to take control of my own life. The Stanford Medical Center website loaded slowly on my laptop, each pixel feeling like a small victory against my parents' deception. I scrolled through Dr. Martinez's profile, asterisk pioneering researcher in advanced cochlear implant technology, with over 200 successful surgeries performed. Asterisk 200 people who could now hear because someone believed in them. My phone buzzed again. A text from my ASL tutor, Sarah, asterisk can we reschedule Thursday? My daughter's recital. Asterisk. Recital. Music. Something I'd never experienced but had always wondered about. I'd felt vibrations at concerts, my college friends dragged me to a few, but everyone always said I was missing the real magic. The way their faces lit up when a certain song came on, or how they'd suddenly go quiet when something beautiful played. I wanted to know what that felt like. I dialed Stanford's main number, my heart racing as the receptionist's face appeared on my videophone screen. I need to speak with Dr. Jennifer Martinez about cochlear implant surgery, I signed, watching the interpreter relay my words. Are you a current patient? I was being considered for the procedure. Maya Chin Williams. The receptionist's expression shifted slightly as she typed. I see your file was recently closed at your family's request. You'll need parental consent to reopen. I'm 22, I interrupted. I don't need parental consent. A pause. More typing. You're correct. Let me transfer you to Dr. Martinez's coordinator. 20 minutes later, I had an appointment for Monday, June 23rd at 2 p.m. The coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, had been surprisingly understanding when I explained that my parents weren't supportive. Apparently, it happened more often than I'd expected. The procedure costs $127,000, she'd signed through the interpreter. But I see your insurance was pre-approved. That authorization is still valid for another 60 days. 60 days. My parents had been gambling that I'd never find out, that the window would close and a decision would be made for me. I spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could about cochlear implants. The surgery itself was relatively simple, a few hours under general anesthesia. The real work came after months of auditory training, learning to interpret the electronic signals as sounds, then speech, then maybe even music. Music. I found myself on YouTube, watching people's reactions to hearing for the first time. A 6-year-old girl bursting into tears when she heard her mother's voice. An elderly man overwhelmed by birdsong. A teenager laughing with joy at the sound of rain. What did rain sound like? Or laughter? Or my own voice? I'd been signing my entire life, but I'd been told I could speak. My parents hired speech therapists when I was young, before they apparently gave up on the idea of me being normal. I wondered if my voice sounded the way I imagined it in my head. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Sarah, my ASL tutor, was confirming our session for tomorrow. I stared at her message and realized something that made my chest tight. If the surgery worked, I might not need ASL tutoring anymore. I might not need interpreters, or special accommodations, or any of the things that had defined my entire existence. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I closed the laptop and looked around Dad's study, at the awards lining his walls, the photos of him shaking hands with politicians and CEOs, the diploma from Harvard Business School. Everything about this room screamed success and control. But he couldn't control this. Not anymore. I had 5 days to prepare for the appointment that would change everything. 5 days to figure out how to hide the surgery from my parents until I was ready to confront them. The charity gala was exactly 3 weeks away. Monday arrived with California fog rolling in from the bay, making everything feel muted and gray, which seemed fitting for what I was about to do. I'd spent the weekend crafting lies, telling my parents I was taking a pottery class in Palo Alto on weekday afternoons. Mom had actually seemed pleased, texting back, asterisk how wonderful. Very therapeutic. Take pictures. Asterisk. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was more excited about fake pottery than she'd ever been about real medical possibilities. Dr. Martinez's office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of sterile white walls, it was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs arranged in conversation clusters rather than the typical medical waiting room rows. The audiologist, Rebecca Torres, greeted me in fluent ASL. Apparently half her patients were deaf or hard of hearing. Before we discussed surgery, Dr. Martinez began once we were seated in her consultation room. I want to understand what changed your mind. When I spoke with your parents in March, they indicated you weren't interested in the procedure. My hand stilled mid-sign. They told you I wasn't interested? Dr. Martinez's expression shifted, the professional mask slipping slightly. Your mother specifically said you were, quote, happy with your deaf identity and didn't want to change who you are. The words hit like physical blows. I stared at her, my hands frozen in my lap, before finally finding the strength to respond. I never said that. I didn't even know about the procedure until I found the paperwork Friday night. Your parents never discussed this with you? Rebecca's signs were sharp, precise. At all? Never. My voice felt raw even though I couldn't hear it. They've been telling people I'm studying abroad to avoid explaining why I don't come to social events anymore. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her pen clicking against her clipboard. Maya, I need to ask directly, are your parents financially or emotionally abusive? Because what you're describing. They're not abusive, I signed quickly, though the words felt strange leaving my hands. They're embarrassed. They built this perfect life, perfect image. A deaf daughter doesn't fit the narrative. The room fell quiet. Rebecca and Dr. Martinez exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Okay, Dr. Martinez finally said. Let's focus on what you want. Tell me about your expectations for this surgery. For the next hour, we went through everything, the surgical procedure, recovery timeline, realistic outcomes. The new implant technology was remarkable, better sound quality, improved music appreciation, even Bluetooth connectivity. But Dr. Martinez was careful to manage expectations. You'll hear, but it won't be like natural hearing, she explained. Everything will sound electronic at first. Speech will come first, then environmental sounds. Music is usually last and most difficult. How long before I could have a conversation? Without signing? With intensive therapy? 3 to 6 months for basic conversation. A year for phone calls. Maybe longer for complex discussions. 3 to 6 months. The gala was in 3 weeks. Dr. Martinez, I signed slowly, hypothetically, how quickly could someone learn to say a few specific sentences clearly? If they practiced obsessively? She tilted her head. Are you planning something? I thought about the gala invitation on Dad's bulletin board, about the award they'd receive for disability advocacy, about the speech they'd give to a room full of San Francisco's elite. I want to be able to thank my parents, I lied smoothly. When I'm ready to tell them about the surgery. Dr. Martinez's smile was gentle but knowing. With your speech therapy background and determination, you could probably manage a short, rehearsed speech within 6 to 8 weeks post-activation. But Maya, she leaned forward, whatever you're planning, make sure it's for the right reasons. I nodded, already calculating timelines in my head. Surgery could be scheduled for Thursday, July 3rd, implant activation 1 week later on July 10th. 5 days of intensive practice before the gala on July 15th. It would be cutting it close, but it was possible. I'd like to schedule the surgery, I signed. As soon as possible. Dr. Martinez made a note in my file. I'll need to see you twice more before surgery, pre-op physical and counseling session. And Maya? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about my parents' lies, their shame, their charity award. I'm ready, I signed. I've been ready my whole life. The preoperative counseling session with Dr. Patricia Hoffman was scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m., 2 days before my surgery. I'd been researching cochlear implant experiences obsessively, watching activation videos until my eyes burned, when my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood freeze. Mom, asterisk Sarah mentioned you canceled ASL tutoring indefinitely? What's going on? Coming over in 20 minutes. Asterisk. Sarah. My ASL tutor who I'd dismissed Monday afternoon, telling her I was taking a break to focus on pottery classes. I'd forgotten how small the deaf community was in the Bay Area. Of course she knew other people who worked with my family. I shoved my laptop under the couch cushions and scattered some pottery magazines I'd panic bought at CVS across the coffee table. 20 minutes to create a believable lie about why I'd suddenly stopped ASL sessions after 3 years. Mom's BMW pulled into the circular driveway at exactly 2:47 p.m. Through the guest house windows, I watched her check her reflection in the side mirror before walking to my door, always performing, even for an audience of one. Maya, honey. She breezed in wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's rent. I brought lunch from that place you like in Menlo Park. The place I liked. She bought sushi from Nobu, which I'd mentioned enjoying exactly once, 2 years ago. But it was the thought that counted, right? Thanks, Mom. I signed, accepting the expensive takeout bag. Sarah overreacted about the tutoring thing. I just wanted to try something different. Mom settled onto my couch, smoothing her skirt. Different how? You've been making such good progress with ASL. Progress. Like sign language was a hobby instead of my primary form of communication. I'm exploring other interests. The pottery classes are really fulfilling. That's wonderful. Her smile was bright and hollow. Actually, that reminds me, Mrs. Patterson from the country club asked about you yesterday. Her daughter just got back from studying in Barcelona too. She thought you girls might have crossed paths. Mrs. Patterson. The name hit me like a slap. The same Mrs. Patterson who was Dr. Martinez's coordinator, who'd scheduled my surgery. My mouth went dry as I realized the connection. Linda Patterson from Mom's Country Club was married to Dr. Martinez's office manager. Oh, I managed to sign, my hand suddenly clumsy. Barcelona's a big city. I doubt we met. Mom was scrolling through her phone now, not really paying attention. She mentioned her daughter loved the music scene there. All those flamenco shows and street performances. You must have enjoyed that too, even with. She gestured vaguely at her ears. Even with. Like my deafness was a minor inconvenience that could be politely overlooked. Sure, I lied. Very vibrant. My phone, face down on the coffee table, chose that moment to buzz with what I knew was probably a reminder about tomorrow's counseling session. Mom glanced at it automatically. You're popular today. That's the third call you've gotten since I arrived. 3 calls. I'd had the phone on silent, but the screen would have lit up each time. My stomach churned as I realized I had no idea what the caller ID might have shown. Probably spam, I signed weakly. Mom stood up, smoothing her skirt again. Well, I should let you get back to your pottery research. She gestured at the magazines I'd scattered. Although these look brand new. Haven't even cracked the spine on this one. She held up Ceramics Monthly, and I could see the price tag I'd forgotten to remove stuck to the back cover. I like to keep them pristine, I said, the lie tasting bitter. Mom's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight tightening around her eyes that I recognized from childhood. The look that meant she knew I wasn't telling the truth but wasn't sure what the truth actually was. Maya, she signed slowly, if something was wrong, you'd tell me, wouldn't you? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Here was my chance to confront her about the medical documents, about Dr. Martinez, about the lies they'd been telling everyone for 2 years. Instead, I smiled and signed, of course, Mom. Everything's perfect. She kissed my forehead and left, her heels clicking across the hardwood as she walked back to her BMW. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for a full minute before driving away, phone pressed to her ear. My surgery was in 36 hours, and I had the terrible feeling that my window of secrecy was rapidly closing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow outside my window looked like Mom's BMW returning, every notification on my phone felt like an incoming confrontation. At 3:17 a.m., I finally gave up and opened my laptop to review Dr. Martinez's pre-surgery instructions one more time. The email was already marked as read. My blood turned to ice. I never opened emails on my laptop, I always used my phone. But there it was, opened at 11:43 p.m., 3 hours after I'd gone to bed. Someone had been in my guest house while I was sleeping. I scrolled through my recent emails with growing panic. The surgery confirmation, the pre-op instructions, the payment authorization from my trust fund, all marked as read. All opened last night between 11:30 and midnight. My hands shook as I checked my browsing history. Someone had looked at my Stanford Medical Center bookmarks, my YouTube searches for cochlear implant activation reactions, even my research on post-surgery speech therapy timelines. They knew. Somehow, they'd figured it out. I threw on clothes and crept toward the main house, my bare feet silent on the flagstone path. Dad's study window glowed with lamplight, he was awake, which never happened. Dad was asleep by 10 p.m. every night like clockwork, up at 5 a.m. for his morning run. Pressing myself against the exterior wall, I could just barely see through the gap in the curtains. Dad sat at his desk, my printed emails spread in front of him like evidence at a crime scene. Mom paced behind him, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I couldn't read their lips from this angle, but their body language screamed fury. Dad's jaw was clenched tight, his hands fisted on the desk. Mom's gestures were sharp, aggressive, nothing like her usual controlled elegance. My phone buzzed with a text. Dad, family meeting. Main house. Now. I stared at the message, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Through the window, I watched Dad hold up his phone, showing Mom my lack of response. She said something that made him stand up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. Another text, Maya Elizabeth Chin Williams. Get in this house immediately. My full name. The nuclear option. I hadn't heard my full name since I crashed Mom's Tesla into the fountain when I was 17. I walked to the front door on unsteady legs, my key trembling in the lock. The house felt different at night, bigger, colder, like a museum after hours. Dad's study door was open, spilling light into the hallway. They were waiting for me. Sit, Dad commanded, pointing to the leather chair across from his desk. His face was stone, all traces of his usual distant politeness gone. Mom stood behind him like a sentry, her arms crossed. Even disheveled and exhausted, she looked formidable. This was the woman who negotiated million-dollar real estate deals before she married Dad and became a professional socialite. Linda Patterson called me at 11 o'clock tonight, Mom began, her signs crisp and angry. Imagine my surprise when she mentioned how excited she was about your upcoming surgery. Surgery that I supposedly approved. The papers from my email were spread across Dad's desk like accusations. My surgery confirmation, financial authorizations, even screenshots of my browser history. You went into my computer, I signed, anger finally breaking through my fear. While I was sleeping. This is our house, Dad's response was sharp, dismissive. Everything in it belongs to us. Including you, apparently, since you're still acting like a child. I'm 22. You're 22 and living in our guest house, using our insurance, spending money from a trust fund we manage, Mom interrupted. Did you really think you could have made your surgery without us finding out? The betrayal burned in my chest. Not just their invasion of my privacy, but the casualness of it. Like my autonomy was something they could revoke at will. Dr. Martinez said you told her I wasn't interested, I signed, my hands shaking with rage. You lied to her. You lied to me. Dad's expression didn't change. We made the decision we thought was best. Based on what? Your embarrassment? The words hung in the air between us like a live wire. Mom's face went very still, and I knew I'd finally said the thing we'd all been dancing around for years. The surgery was in 34 hours, and the battle for my life had officially begun. Embarrassment? Mom's laugh was sharp, bitter. You think this is about embarrassment? She moved around the desk, leaning against it so she could sign directly in my line of sight. Her manicured fingers were precise, each word deliberate. Maya, we've spent over $300,000 on your education, therapy, and accommodation since you were diagnosed. We've restructured our entire lives around your needs. The number hit like a physical blow. $300,000, itemized like a business expense. The guest house renovation alone was $80,000 to make it accessible, Dad added, pulling out a manila folder I hadn't seen before. Special lighting systems, vibrating alert devices, modified doorbells. Do you have any idea what we've sacrificed? Sacrificed. Like loving their daughter was a financial hardship. I never asked you to. You didn't have to ask, Mom interrupted. We're your parents. But this surgery? She gestured at the papers scattered across Dad's desk. This is reckless. Experimental. What if something goes wrong? What if you're worse off than before? I stared at them both, finally understanding. This wasn't about medical risks or my well-being. This was about control. For 22 years, they'd managed every aspect of my disability, turned it into something they could handle, contain, explain away to their friends. Dr. Martinez has performed over 200 successful surgeries, I signed. The complication rate is less than 2%. You know this because you have all her reports. Dad leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Dr. Martinez doesn't understand our family dynamics. She doesn't know how well you've adapted to your current situation. Current situation. They're euphemism for my isolation. What if I want more than adaptation? The words came out stronger than I felt. What if I want to hear music? Or have a phone conversation? Or not need an interpreter for the rest of my life? And what if it doesn't work? Mom's signs were sharp, almost violent. What if you go through all this pain and trauma and you're still deaf? What then? The question hung between us, and I realized she was terrified. Not of the surgery failing, but of it succeeding. Of me becoming someone they couldn't predict or control. Linda Patterson mentioned something else, Mom continued, her expression calculating now. She said you asked specifically about recovery timelines for public speaking. That you wanted to know about giving speeches. My blood went cold. I'd forgotten about that conversation with Mrs. Patterson, how I'd pushed for specific details about speech therapy schedules. The gala is in 18 days, Dad said quietly. You're planning something for the gala. It wasn't a question. Dad hadn't built a $50 million venture capital firm by missing strategic connections. He could read people, predict their moves, anticipate their leverage points. Robert and Linda Chin Williams, honored for outstanding disability advocacy, I signed slowly, watching their faces change. How would it look if their own daughter stood up and told the truth about how you've really treated her? Mom's face went white. Maya, you wouldn't. But I was already standing, adrenaline flooding my system. Surgery is Thursday at 7 a.m. I'll be recovered and activated by the gala. I'm going to walk onto that stage and thank you both publicly for everything you've done for me. Every lie, every restriction, every time you chose your reputation over your daughter. We'll stop the surgery, Dad said, reaching for his phone. One call to Stanford and I'm an adult. You can't stop anything. My hands were steady now, certain. But you can try to explain to 300 of your closest friends why your daughter just exposed you as frauds. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Mom sank into the chair beside Dad's desk, her perfect composure cracking. What do you want? She whispered. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw two people who had spent so much energy maintaining their image that they'd forgotten how to love their own child. I want you to stay away from me until after the surgery, I signed. And then we'll see what happens next. I walked out of Dad's study at 4:23 a.m., leaving them surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal. In 30 hours, everything would change. The next 30 hours crawled by like torture. I'd unplugged my landline and put my phone on airplane mode, but I could feel my parents' presence in the main house like a storm system hovering offshore. Twice I caught glimpses of Dad pacing in his study, phone pressed to his ear. Mom's silhouette appeared in the kitchen window every few hours, watching my guest house like a sentry. At 2 p.m. Wednesday, 18 hours before surgery, a black town car pulled into our driveway. I watched through my bedroom blinds as a woman in an expensive suit stepped out, briefcase in hand. She had the predatory confidence of a lawyer, all sharp angles and calculated movements. Dad met her at the front door, shaking hands like they were closing a business deal. My stomach dropped. They were actually going to try to stop this. An hour later, my phone rang despite being in airplane mode, somehow they'd gotten through. I let it go to voicemail, but the red notification dot felt like a threat. The message was from Patricia Morrison, Esquire of Morrison, Lewis and Associates. Miss Jen Williams, I represent your parents in family matters. Please call my office immediately regarding tomorrow's medical procedure. There are legal complications we need to discuss before you proceed. Time-sensitive matter. Legal complications. My hand shook as I played the message twice more, trying to read between the professional language. What kind of legal complications could there be for an adult getting elective surgery? I called Dr. Martinez's office, my heart hammering as Mrs. Patterson's face appeared on the videophone. Maya, thank God you called, she signed quickly. We've had some concerning developments today. What kind of developments? Your parents' attorney contacted Stanford's legal department this morning. She's claiming you're not mentally competent to make medical decisions, that you're having some kind of psychological breakdown. The words hit like physical blows. Incompetent. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. That's insane, I signed. I'm fine. I've been planning this rationally for weeks. I know, Mrs. Patterson interrupted. Dr. Martinez knows too. But Stanford's lawyers are being cautious. They want a psychiatric evaluation before they'll proceed with surgery. How long does that take? Usually? 2 weeks minimum. But Maya. Her expression grew troubled. There's something else. Your parents also filed a complaint claiming you've been forging financial documents. They're saying you don't have authorization to access your trust fund for medical expenses. My world tilted sideways. The trust fund was mine. Grandma Chen had set it up specifically for my education and medical needs. But if they were claiming fraud, can they do that? Legally? Mrs. Patterson's hesitation told me everything. It's complicated. The trust has multiple signatories due to your age when it was established. Your parents are claiming you've been accessing funds without proper approval. Through my window, I could see the lawyer's town car still parked in our driveway. She'd been here for 3 hours now, probably crafting the perfect legal trap. Mrs. Patterson, I signed slowly. If I showed up tomorrow morning with cash, my own money, not the trust fund, could we still do the surgery? Maya, Dr. Martinez is concerned about your safety at this point. Your parents are claiming you're having a mental health crisis. They painted a picture of you as unstable, impulsive. Because I want to hear? My signs were sharp, angry. Because I want to make my own medical decisions? I'm on your side, she signed firmly. But we need documentation that you're mentally competent and financially independent. Otherwise, Stanford won't proceed. I ended the call and sank onto my couch, staring at the pottery magazines I'd used to lie to Mom just 2 days ago. Everything was unraveling faster than I could control it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. * Maya, this is Patricia Morrison. I'm in your parents' living room and would like to speak with you about resolving this situation amicably. I think we can find a solution that works for everyone. *. I looked toward the main house, where warm light spilled from every window like a beacon. Inside, 3 people were deciding my fate without me. 16 hours until surgery, and I was running out of moves. I stared at the lawyer's text for a full minute before typing back. * I'll be there in 10 minutes. *. If they wanted to play legal games, I needed to understand the rules. Patricia Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with a kind of sharp bob haircut that screamed expensive Manhattan salon. She stood when I entered Dad's study, extending a manicured hand that I ignored. Maya, thank you for joining us. I know this situation is stressful for everyone. My parents sat on the leather couch like defendants, which would have been satisfying if I wasn't the one walking into their trap. What exactly are you claiming? I signed, keeping my expression neutral. Morrison opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Your parents are concerned about a pattern of erratic behavior over the past few weeks. Sudden isolation from your support systems, secretive financial transactions, impulsive decision-making regarding major medical procedures. She slid a document across Dad's desk. This is a temporary conservatorship petition. It would place your medical and financial decisions under your parents' guidance until we can ensure you're making rational choices. Conservatorship. The word made my skin crawl. I'd read about Britney Spears, about adults trapped in legal cages built by their own families. I'm 22 years old, I signed slowly. I graduated summa cum laude from Gallaudet. I've managed my own finances for 4 years. Have you? Morrison's smile was razor thin. Because according to bank records, you attempted to transfer $127,000 from your trust fund Monday morning without proper authorization. That's technically embezzlement. My blood turned to ice. That money is mine. Grandma Chen left it specifically for my medical and educational expenses. The Helen Chen Educational Trust requires dual signatures for withdrawals over $50,000, Dad interjected, his signs crisp and businesslike. Your signature and mine. You never requested authorization. The room spun slightly as I realized the trap they built. Of course the trust had safeguards. I'd been 18 when Grandma died, barely legal. But I'd been using smaller amounts for years without issues. You would have said no, I signed. We would have discussed it rationally, Mom added. Like a family. Morrison leaned forward, her expression sympathetic in the way that lawyers practiced in mirrors. Maya, your parents aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect you from making an irreversible mistake while you're clearly in emotional distress. What emotional distress? My hands shook with fury. Finding out my parents have been lying to me? Discovering they're ashamed of their deaf daughter? See? Mom's signs were desperate now. This is exactly what we're talking about. You're lashing out, making accusations. They're not accusations if they're true. Morrison made a note on her legal pad. Maya, let me be direct. If you proceed with this surgery tomorrow, your parents will file for emergency conservatorship. A judge will see a young deaf woman making impulsive medical decisions without family support, using potentially fraudulent financial transfers. How do you think that looks? The question hung in the air like a noose. I could see the narrative they'd constructed. Unstable daughter rebels against loving parents, makes reckless choices that could harm her. In their version, I was the problem. What do you want? I asked finally. Morrison exchanged glances with my parents. Postpone the surgery for 60 days. Attend family counseling. Work with your parents to find a compromise everyone can live with. 60 days. Long enough for the insurance authorization to expire, for Dr. Martinez to take other patients, for their lawyer to build an airtight conservatorship case. And if I refuse? Then we'll see you in court tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Morrison said, closing her briefcase with a decisive snap. 1 hour before your scheduled surgery. I looked at my parents, seeing them clearly for the first time. This wasn't love or protection, this was warfare, and they brought a lawyer to a family fight. I need 24 hours to consider this, I signed. Morrison nodded. That's reasonable. But Maya? Don't do anything rash tonight. We'll be monitoring your accounts. As I walked back to the guest house, I realized they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I'd fight them in their system, by their rules. But I'd learned something important at Gallaudet. Sometimes the only way to win is to change the game entirely. I sat in my dark guest house at 3 a.m., staring at my laptop screen and the number that could change everything, $47,000. That was my checking account balance, money I'd saved from my trust fund allowances over 4 years, staying just under the $50,000 threshold that required Dad's signature. Morrison had said they were monitoring my accounts, but she'd only mentioned the trust fund. My personal checking was mine alone, opened when I turned 18 with money Grandma Chen had given me directly before she died. $47,000 wasn't enough for Stanford, but I'd found something else during my sleepless research binge. Dr. Michael Torres at UCSF had been Dr. Martinez's partner before starting his own practice. His website showed the same success rates, same technology, and a cash price of $45,000 for patients without insurance complications. I'd already sent him my medical records at 2:30 a.m. My phone buzzed with an incoming video call at 3:17 a.m. Unknown number, but the caller ID showed Dr. Torres, UCSF. Miss Chin Williams? Dr. Torres looked tired but alert, probably used to emergency calls. I received your files. I understand you need surgery very quickly due to family circumstances? I explained the situation in rapid ASL, watching his expression grow increasingly troubled as my interpreter relayed the details. I've seen this before, he signed when I finished. Families who built their identity around managing a disabled family member. The idea of that person becoming independent threatens their whole dynamic. Can you help me? Dr. Torres was quiet for a moment, scrolling through something off camera. Your medical profile is excellent. Dr. Martinez's pre-op work is thorough. I wouldn't need to repeat any tests. I could perform the surgery Friday morning if you can be at UCSF by 6 a.m. Friday. 1 day later than planned, but still 8 days before the gala. There's one complication, he continued. If your parents file for conservatorship, they could potentially have the surgery reversed or prevent activation of the implant. You'd need to be completely independent, your own insurance, your own legal representation. My heart sank. I don't have insurance outside my parents' plan. Actually, you might. California has emergency Medicaid provisions for adults in abusive family situations. I know a social worker who specializes in these cases, Maria Santos. She's helped other patients escape medical neglect. Medical neglect. The term felt both accurate and devastating. Dr. Torres, if I showed up Friday morning with cash and Medicaid authorization, could we do this without my parents knowing until after? Maya, his expression grew serious. What you're describing is essentially medical emancipation. Once we activate that implant, there's no going back to your old life. Your relationship with your parents will be permanently changed. I thought about Dad's study, about Morrison's briefcase full of legal weapons, about Mom watching my guest house like I was under surveillance. It's already permanently changed, I signed. They made sure of that. Dr. Torres nodded slowly. I'll send you Maria Santos' contact information. If she can get your Medicaid approved by Thursday afternoon, we'll do the surgery Friday at 6 a.m. After ending the call, I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my college friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal in San Francisco. If my parents wanted to play legal games, I needed someone who understood the rules. At 4:45 a.m., I sent messages to 3 people who could change my life: Maria Santos about emergency Medicaid, Jessica about finding a lawyer who worked weekends, and Sarah, my former ASL tutor, asking if she knew anyone who could house sit a deaf woman recovering from surgery. By 5 a.m., I had responses from all 3. The game wasn't over. I was just changing teams. Outside my window, the main house glowed with lamplight. My parents were awake too, probably planning their next move. But for the first time in days, I felt like I was playing offense instead of defense. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of San Francisco weather that made everything feel uncertain. I sat in Maria Santos' Honda Civic at 5:47 a.m., watching UCSF Medical Center emerge from the fog like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Emergency Medicaid came through at 11 p.m. last night, Maria said, her ASL crisp despite the early hour. But Maya, I need you to understand, once we walk through those doors, your parents will know exactly where you are within hours. Hospital admissions are trackable. I clutched the manila folder containing my new life, Medicaid authorization, temporary address at Sarah's apartment in the Mission, even a basic cell phone plan that Jessica had set up under her name. 48 hours of planning had created a paper trail leading away from Atherton and my parents' control. Jessica's lawyer friend thinks she can block any conservatorship attempts, I signed, trying to convince myself as much as Maria. Adult children have rights, even if their parents disagree with their choices. Rights and reality aren't always the same thing, Maria replied gently. Especially when one side has expensive lawyers and the other side has a public defender who's never handled a case like this. My phone, the new one Jessica had bought, buzzed with a text from Dr. Torres, * pre-op at 6 a.m. Surgery 7:30. Everything looks good on our end. *. Everything looked good. If only that were actually true. We walked through UCSF's main entrance, and I felt the weight of crossing a line I couldn't uncross. The security guard barely glanced at my ID, Maya Chin Williams, temporary address on Guerrero Street, insurance through California Emergency Medicaid. For the first time in my life, I existed on paper without my parents' signatures. Dr. Torres met us in the pre-surgical area, his expression cautiously optimistic. How are we feeling this morning? Terrified, I signed honestly. But ready. Your parents called our main number 43 minutes ago, he said, checking his watch. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and demanding we cancel the procedure. I told them we'd received legal clearance to proceed, but Maya, he paused, choosing his words carefully. They mentioned something about a private investigator tracking your location. They might be on their way here. A private investigator. Of course. Dad probably had 3 of them on retainer for corporate espionage cases. Maria's face tightened. How long is the surgery? 2 hours for the procedure, another hour in recovery before she's conscious enough to move, Dr. Torres replied. If they show up with lawyers and court orders. Then we better move fast, I signed, surprising myself with my calm. Let's do this before they can stop us. The pre-op area buzzed with efficient activity as nurses checked my vitals and started in 4. At 7:15 a.m., a surgical resident named Dr. Kim reviewed the procedure one final time, implant placement behind my left ear, electrode array insertion into my cochlea, testing to ensure proper positioning. When you wake up, you won't hear anything yet, she explained through an interpreter. The implant needs to heal for a week before activation. But Maya, once we activate it, you'll never experience silence the same way again. Never experience silence again. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. At 7:28 a.m., 2 minutes before they wheeled me into surgery, my old phone, the one connected to my parents' plan, lit up with 17 missed calls and a text that made my blood run cold. Dad, * Patricia Morrison has emergency court orders. We're 10 minutes away. This ends now. Asterisk. I looked at Maria, who was reading over my shoulder, her face pale. Dr. Torres, I signed urgently as they began pushing my gurney toward the operating room. Whatever happens, don't let them stop this. Please. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia mask covered my face was Maria arguing with hospital security in the hallway, and through the windows, a black town car pulling into the UCSF parking garage. My parents had found me. But it was too late to stop what I'd already started. I woke up in stages, like surfacing from deep water. First came the awareness of white ceiling tiles, then the antiseptic smell, then the strange sensation of bandages wrapped around my left ear. My throat felt raw from intubation, and when I tried to swallow, it hurt. The silence felt different somehow. Expectant. Maria's face appeared in my peripheral vision, her expression carefully neutral in the way that meant bad news was coming. She held up a tablet with a message already typed. Asterisk surgery went perfectly. Dr. Torres says the implant placement is ideal. But we have problems. Asterisk. I tried to sit up, but the room tilted sideways. Maria's hands pressed gently on my shoulders, keeping me flat while she typed a new message. Asterisk your parents arrived with court orders 20 minutes into surgery. Emergency conservatorship hearing scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Judge Patricia Henley presiding. Asterisk. Judge Henley. I knew that name from Dad's country club connections. She'd been at their Christmas party 2 years running. My heart sank as I realized how deep their influence ran. There's more, Maria continued typing. Asterisk hospital administration is requiring security escort when you're discharged. Your parents' lawyer claims you're a flight risk. Asterisk. I grabbed the tablet, my fingers clumsy from anesthesia. Asterisk, when can I leave? Asterisk. Asterisk Dr. Torres wants to keep you overnight for observation. Normal protocol. But Maya, they've frozen your Medicaid authorization pending the competency hearing. If you need additional medical care, you're responsible for full payment. Asterisk. The trap was tightening. Even in my post-surgical haze, I could see their strategy: force me into debt I couldn't pay, make me dependent on them again, prove I was too unstable to make my own decisions. A new face appeared beside Maria, a woman in her 50s wearing a rumpled blazer and carrying a public defender's badge. I'm Jennifer Walsh, your court-appointed attorney, she typed on the tablet. Asterisk I'll be honest, this is a difficult case. Your parents have documentation going back weeks showing erratic behavior, financial irregularities, and what they're calling dangerous medical decisions without family consultation. Asterisk. I typed back, asterisk, what are my chances? Asterisk. Walsh's hesitation lasted too long. Asterisk Judge Henley tends to err on the side of family preservation. She'll see concerned parents trying to protect their daughter from making irreversible mistakes. Asterisk. Asterisk, what about my rights as an adult? Asterisk. Asterisk you have rights. But competency hearings focus on judgment and decision-making capacity. Your parents will argue that someone with sound judgment doesn't secretly undergo major surgery while living in isolation. Asterisk. The irony was suffocating. They'd isolated me, then used that isolation as evidence of instability. My phone buzzed, the new one Jessica had set up. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk Maya, this is your mother. Please call me. We can work this out as a family. Asterisk. I showed the message to Maria, who frowned and typed, asterisk don't respond. Anything you say can be used in Monday's hearing. Your parents' lawyer is building a case that you're in psychological crisis. Asterisk. Another text arrived. Asterisk sweetheart, Dad and I are staying at the Fairmont downtown. We're not leaving San Francisco until we know you're safe. We love you. Asterisk. We love you. The words felt like poison wrapped in silk. Dr. Torres appeared in the doorway, still wearing surgical scrubs. He looked exhausted and troubled as he pulled up a chair beside my bed. The surgery was textbook perfect, he typed on the tablet. Asterisk, but I need to tell you something important. Your parents' attorney contacted the FDA this morning, filing a complaint about the experimental nature of this implant model. Asterisk. My blood went cold. Asterisk, what does that mean? Asterisk. Asterisk, it means they're trying to prevent activation of your implant next Friday. If the FDA opens an investigation, we can't proceed with turning it on until it's resolved. That process could take months. Asterisk. I stared at the message, understanding finally dawning. They couldn't undo the surgery, but they could make sure it never worked. I'd be left deaf with a useless piece of technology in my head, exactly the kind of outcome they could point to as evidence of my poor judgment. The gala is next Saturday, I typed. Asterisk, can we activate before then? Asterisk. Dr. Torres and Maria exchanged glances before he typed, asterisk only if you can prove legal independence by Friday. Otherwise, your parents can block any further treatment as your conservators. Asterisk. 6 days to win a legal battle against people with unlimited resources and 22 years of practice controlling my life. The game wasn't over, but I was running out of moves. I discharged myself from UCSF at 6 a.m. Saturday morning against Dr. Torres' recommendations, the bandages around my left ear hidden under a giant's baseball cap Sarah had brought me. The implant site throbbed with each heartbeat, but I couldn't afford to stay in a hospital bed while my parents built their legal case. Sarah's Mission District apartment was a studio barely bigger than my guest house bathroom, but it felt like freedom. No surveillance cameras, no parents watching from mansion windows, no lawyers monitoring my every move. Jessica's coming over at 10 with the paralegal research, Sarah signed, handing me coffee in a chipped mug that said world's okayest teacher. She found something interesting about Judge Henley. I was about to ask what when my phone, the old one I'd forgotten to leave behind, rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Maya. Dad's voice came through the tiny speaker, and even though I couldn't hear it, I could see his mouth forming my name on the video call. Thank God. We need to talk. There's nothing to discuss, I signed, watching his expression shift from relief to frustration as the interpreter relayed my words. You had surgery without telling us. Major brain surgery, Maya. What if something had gone wrong? What if you died on that table? The concern in his face looked genuine, which somehow made it worse. I'm 22 years old, Dad. I don't need permission. You needed us, Mom interrupted, appearing beside him on the screen. She looked terrible, no makeup, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes from Friday. You were so determined to punish us that you risked your life to prove a point. This isn't about punishment. It's about finally being able to hear. Dad leaned closer to the camera. And what if it doesn't work? Dr. Martinez warned us about unrealistic expectations. What if you go through all this pain and trauma and you're still deaf? The question hit harder coming from him than from Dr. Martinez. Because underneath his concern was the assumption that had defined my entire life, that being deaf was something so terrible it was worth any risk to escape. Then I'll still be deaf, I signed slowly. But I'll be deaf by choice, not because my parents decided for me. Mom's face crumpled. Maya, we were protecting you. You were protecting yourselves. The words came out harsher than I intended, but 22 years of stored resentment had to go somewhere. When's the last time you introduced me to anyone? When's the last time I was invited to a family event that wasn't just the three of us? The silence stretched between us, and I could see the truth in their faces. They couldn't answer because the answer was never. The conservatorship hearing is Monday at 9 a.m., Dad said finally, his businessman voice replacing the concerned father act. If you contest it, this becomes public record. Everyone will know about your medical history, your living situation, the trust fund issues. Is that really what you want? The threat was crystal clear. Submit to their control or have my private life dissected in open court, probably covered by San Francisco Chronicle reporters who loved stories about wealthy families and their scandals. Patricia Morrison is very good at her job, Mom added softly. She's painted a picture of a young woman in crisis, making dangerous impulsive decisions. The judge will see someone who needs protection, not independence. My hands trembled as I ended the call without responding. Through the window, I could see the Saturday morning fog rolling over Dolores Park, normal people living normal lives without lawyers and court hearings and parents who hired private investigators to track their adult children. Sarah appeared beside me with a fresh cup of coffee and a grim expression. Jessica just texted, she signed. Judge Henley's daughter goes to Stanford. Guess who's been donating to her scholarship fund for 3 years? My parents had thought of everything. I stared at Sarah's message about Judge Henley's Stanford connection, feeling the walls close in around me. But something nagged at the back of my mind, a detail I couldn't quite grasp through the post-surgical fog. Sarah, I signed slowly, what's Judge Henley's daughter's name? Sarah scrolled through Jessica's text messages. Rebecca Henley. Pre-med student, apparently. Why? Rebecca. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the Stanford Medical Center website, scrolling through Dr. Martinez's staff directory until I found what I was looking for, Rebecca Torres, audiology intern. Not Rebecca Henley, Rebecca Torres. Jessica got it wrong, I signed, my hands shaking with sudden adrenaline. Judge Henley's daughter isn't at Stanford. Dr. Torres mentioned his daughter was doing her audiology internship with Dr. Martinez. Rebecca Torres, not Rebecca Henley. Sarah's eyes widened. So the scholarship donations go to the wrong Rebecca. I was already pulling up San Francisco Superior Court records on my laptop. My parents' lawyer made the same assumption Jessica did. They'd been bribing the wrong judge's family. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. One piece of their strategy had backfired, but I needed more than that to win Monday's hearing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, asterisk found something else. Patricia Morrison has filed for conservatorship in 3 other cases this year. All adult children of wealthy families. 2 were overturned on appeal. Asterisk. I called Jessica immediately, watching her face appear on the screen from what looked like her office on a Saturday morning. The 2 successful appeals had something in common, she signed quickly. Independent medical evaluations. The families had gotten friendly psychiatrists to diagnose the adult children with various conditions, but independent evaluations contradicted those findings. What kind of conditions? Adjustment disorders, impulse control issues, mild cognitive impairment, nothing severe enough to permanently remove someone's rights, but enough to justify temporary conservatorship while they get help. My blood ran cold. Morrison's going to claim I have a psychological condition? It's her standard playbook. She'll have a psychiatrist testify that your recent behavior indicates emotional instability requiring family intervention. Jessica paused, checking her notes. Maya, have you seen any mental health professionals in the past few months? Anyone your parents could have influenced? I thought back through the past year. Dr. Sarah Kim, the therapist I'd seen twice after graduating college and feeling directionless. She'd been recommended by Mom, and our sessions had been covered under my parents' insurance. Shit, I signed. Dr. Kim. I saw her in March and April. Right after my parents talked to Dr. Martinez the first time. Jessica's expression grew troubled. What did you discuss in those sessions? Feeling isolated. Wanting more independence. Frustration with my living situation. Every word I'd spoken to Dr. Kim could now be twisted into evidence of instability and poor judgment. We need our own psychiatric evaluation, Sarah interjected. Someone who can assess you independently and testify that you're completely capable of making your own medical decisions. Can we get that done by Monday morning? Jessica was already typing on her laptop. Dr. Marcus Webb does emergency competency evaluations for adult protective services. He's testified against conservatorship abuse before. If I can get him to see you Sunday afternoon. She trailed off, reading something on her screen that made her face pale. What? I signed. Morrison just filed additional paperwork. Maya, they're not just claiming you're mentally unstable. Jessica looked up from her laptop, her expression grim. They're claiming you forged medical documents to get the surgery. That Dr. Torres operated on you based on falsified records. The room spun around me. That's impossible. Dr. Martinez sent my files directly. I believe you. But if they can prove any inconsistencies between your original Stanford records and what UCSF received, they can claim you manipulated the documentation. That would be medical fraud. My phone rang, Dr. Torres calling my emergency number. Maya, he sighed when I answered, his face tight with concern. Stanford's legal department just contacted UCSF. They're claiming the medical records I received were altered from the originals in their system. Hospital administration is launching an investigation. The trap was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. They weren't just attacking my mental competency, they were trying to make me a criminal. Dr. Torres, were the records altered? Not by you or me. But someone with access to Stanford's system made changes to your file after Dr. Martinez's original consultation. Dates were shifted, risk assessments were modified, even some of your test results were adjusted. My parents. They'd had 3 months to manipulate my medical records, creating a paper trail that would make my surgery look reckless and my decision-making appear impaired. What does this mean for my implant activation? Dr. Torres' pause lasted too long. UCSF won't proceed with activation until the investigation is complete. Maya, I'm sorry. They could suspend my license if this is deemed fraudulent surgery. I ended the call and looked at Sarah, who'd been reading over my shoulder. 48 hours until the hearing, she signed. And now they've made it impossible for your surgery to work even if you win. But I was already formulating a plan, desperate and probably stupid, but the only move I had left. Sarah, I signed, how would you feel about breaking a few rules? Sarah stared at me for a long moment, then walked to her kitchen window and closed the blinds. What kind of rules are we talking about? The kind that could get us arrested, I signed honestly. But also the kind that might save my life. She poured herself a shot of whiskey at 11 a.m. on a Saturday, downed it, and turned back to me. I'm listening. I pulled up the UCSF patient portal on my laptop, logging into the account I created Friday morning. My implant activation is scheduled for next Friday at 2 p.m. The hospital won't proceed because of the investigation, but the appointment still exists in their system. Maya, you can't just walk in and demand they turn on your implant. Not at the hospital, I interrupted. Dr. Torres mentioned that activation can be done with portable equipment. Audiologists use it for house calls with patients who can't travel. Sarah's eyes widened. You want to steal medical equipment? I want to borrow it. Rebecca Torres, Dr. Torres' daughter, the audiology intern, she has access to portable activation systems for her research project with Dr. Martinez. I found her Stanford ID in the directory. And how exactly do you plan to get Rebecca Torres to help you commit what's essentially medical theft? I showed Sarah my laptop screen, which displayed Rebecca's social media profiles. She posted about her thesis project yesterday, democratizing cochlear implant activation for underserved populations. She's studying how to make the technology more accessible to people without insurance or family support. You're going to manipulate a medical student into helping you? I'm going to tell her the truth. I scrolled through Rebecca's Instagram posts, photos from deaf community events, ASL practice videos, advocacy posts about medical discrimination. Look at her feed. She believes in this. She's seen what families like mine do to their disabled children. Sarah sat down heavily on her couch. Maya, even if this Rebecca agrees to help, even if you get the implant activated, you still have to face that hearing Monday morning. And now they can add medical equipment theft to their list of reasons you're unfit to make decisions. Not if the activation works. I pulled up the Charity Gala website on my laptop. The Bay Area Accessibility Foundation dinner is next Saturday at 7 p.m. 300 people, including half of San Francisco's social elite and medical establishment. If I can stand up at that podium and deliver a speech, out loud, without an interpreter, everything changes. How? Because their whole case depends on me being the unstable daughter who made a dangerous, impulsive decision. But if I'm standing there, speaking clearly, thanking them for their advocacy while exposing what they really did, I closed the laptop. It becomes a story about parental abuse, not mental incompetence. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, staring at her empty shot glass. Rebecca Torres lives in Palo Alto, she finally signed. I looked her up while you were talking. She posted about studying at the Stanford Library this weekend. Will you drive me? Maya, this is insane. You're talking about approaching a stranger and asking her to risk her entire medical career to help you commit what could be classified as a felony. I thought about Dr. Kim's therapy notes being twisted into evidence of instability. About my medical records being altered to make my surgery look fraudulent. About Monday morning's hearing where Judge Henley would decide whether I was competent enough to control my own life. They've been planning this for months, I signed. Every move calculated to trap me in a system I can't escape. The only way to win is to change the rules completely. Sarah stood up and grabbed her car keys from the kitchen counter. Rebecca Torres better be as idealistic as her Instagram makes her look. Why? Because we're about to find out if she's willing to risk everything for a complete stranger's freedom. Stanford's Green Library was nearly empty on Sunday afternoon, just a few dedicated pre-med students scattered among the towering stacks. I found Rebecca Torres exactly where her Instagram story said she'd be, 4th floor, neuroscience section, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. She looked up when I approached, her expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity as she registered my bandaged ear and nervous energy. Rebecca Torres? I signed, watching her eyes widen in recognition. I'm Maya Williams. I think you know my case. She closed her textbook slowly. You're the conservatorship patient. The one with the activation hold. Her ASL was fluent, practiced. Maya, I can't talk to you. My dad could lose his license if. They altered my medical records, I interrupted, pulling out my laptop. Look at these files. Someone with Stanford access changed my risk assessments, modified test results, even shifted consultation dates to make my surgery look reckless. Rebecca stared at the screen, her academic curiosity overriding her caution. These timestamps don't make sense. Dr. Martinez's original notes are dated March 15th, but the risk evaluation shows March 8th? That's impossible. My parents had 3 months to manipulate everything. They're not just trying to control me, they're trying to destroy your father's career and make cochlear implant research look dangerous. She scrolled through more documents, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Maya, even if this is true, I can't help you. The activation equipment requires hospital authorization codes that change every 6 hours. I've been prepared for this objection. What if the authorization came from inside the system? Someone with legitimate access who believed the hold was medically inappropriate. Rebecca's hand still on the keyboard. What are you asking me to do? Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., you'll be at UCSF for your regular rotation with the audiology team. The portable activation unit will be logged out for home visits. All I need is 30 minutes. That's not borrowing equipment, Maya. That's theft. Medical fraud. I could be expelled, arrested. Or you could be the audiology student who helped expose a conspiracy to prevent disabled adults from accessing life-changing medical technology. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. Rebecca, you posted dozens of times about medical accessibility. About families who control their disabled children. This is your chance to actually do something about it. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd refuse. Finally, she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo, a young boy with cochlear implants, maybe 8 years old, grinning at the camera. My brother Danny, she signed. Our parents fought his activation for 2 years because they wanted him to stay in deaf culture. He missed critical language development windows because adults decided what was best for his body. Will you help me? Rebecca closed her laptop with shaking hands. The UCSF Audiology Lab has equipment checkout at 7:30 a.m. If someone were to accidentally leave the activation unit in examination room 3B instead of returning it to storage. She looked up at me. You'd have maybe an hour before anyone noticed. That's all I need. Maya, even if this works, even if we activate your implant successfully, you'll still face that hearing tomorrow. They'll still try to take away your rights. I thought about the charity gala 6 days away, about my parents accepting their award for disability advocacy while their daughter sat silenced in the audience. Let me worry about the hearing, I signed. Just help me here. Monday morning, 6:47 a.m., I sat in Sarah's car outside UCSF Medical Center, watching Rebecca Torres walk through the main entrance carrying a standard medical equipment bag. My heart hammered against my ribs as I counted the minutes, 7:30 a.m. checkout, 8:15 activation window, 9 a.m. conservatorship hearing across town. Everything had to go perfectly. At 8:12 a.m., Rebecca emerged from the building and nodded once in our direction. The equipment was in place. I walked into UCSF feeling like I was approaching the edge of a cliff. Examination room 3B was empty except for a small device that looked disappointingly ordinary, a laptop-sized machine with various cables and what looked like a programming wand. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Lie down on the examination table. This is going to feel strange. She attached the programming wand to the external processor that would connect to my implant, her hand steady despite the circumstances. Maya, I need you to understand, the first sounds you hear won't be natural. They'll be electronic, probably overwhelming. Some people panic. I'm ready. She typed commands into the activation computer, calibrating settings based on my surgical reports. We're starting at the lowest possible stimulation levels. When I turn this on, you should hear something, but it might not sound like anything recognizable. I closed my eyes and nodded. Rebecca's finger hovered over the activation key. Once I do this, you'll never experience silence the same way again. Are you absolutely sure? I thought about 22 years of silence, about my parents' lies, about the speech I planned to give Saturday night. Turn it on. She pressed the key. The world exploded. Sound crashed over me like a tsunami, not the gentle introduction Rebecca had promised, but a cacophony of electronic noise that made me gasp and sit up too quickly. My own gasp was a sound, rough and startling, coming from my throat but somehow outside my body. Maya, stay calm. Rebecca's voice was a strange buzzing vibration that my brain slowly began recognizing as speech. This is normal. Your brain needs time to interpret the signals. Her words sounded robotic, like she was speaking through a computer, but they were words. Actual spoken words I was hearing in real time. I started crying, and the sound of my own tears was like static electricity, tiny pops and crackles that accompanied each sob. I can hear myself crying, I whispered, and my voice was alien and electronic but mine. Yes, Rebecca said, adjusting settings on the computer. How does this sound now? Better. Still robotic, but clearer. I could distinguish her voice from the background hum of the building's ventilation system, from the distant sound of traffic outside the window. What time is it? I asked, marveling at how strange my own voice sounded, higher pitched than I'd imagined, with an odd electronic overlay. 8:43 a.m. Maya, we need to go. The hearing. I know. I sat up, the world spinning slightly as my brain processed auditory input for the first time. Rebecca, thank you. You saved my life. She was packing up the equipment with shaking hands. I hope you know what you're doing. At 8:52 a.m., I walked into San Francisco Superior Court wearing jeans, a Stanford hoodie Rebecca had lent me, and a cochlear implant processor that was transmitting the most beautiful sounds I'd ever heard, my own footsteps on marble floors. My parents were already seated with Patricia Morrison, their expressions shifting from surprise to horror as they realized what I'd done. Your Honor, Morrison began as Judge Henley called the hearing to order. The petitioners request immediate medical intervention. Ms. Chin Williams has clearly had unauthorized medical procedures. Your Honor, I interrupted, standing up in the gallery. My voice echoed strangely in the courtroom, electronic but clear. I'd like to address the court myself. Judge Henley stared at me for a long moment. Ms. Chin Williams, are you speaking audibly? Yes, Your Honor. As of 45 minutes ago, I can hear my own voice for the first time in my life. I walked toward the witness stand, every step creating sounds I was still learning to interpret. I'd like to tell you about my parents' definition of advocacy. For the next 20 minutes, I actually spoke, about medical records altered to prevent my surgery, about isolation disguised as independence, about parents who accepted awards for disability advocacy while denying their own daughter access to life-changing technology. When I finished, the courtroom was silent except for the electronic hum of the air conditioning system that I could now hear. Judge Henley looked at my parents, then at Morrison, then back at me. Ms. Chin Williams, do you feel competent to make your own medical and financial decisions? Yes, Your Honor. And I'd like the chance to prove it next Saturday night, when I give a speech at the Bay Area Accessibility Foundation dinner. I looked directly at my parents. I plan to thank my parents publicly for everything they taught me about true advocacy. The conservatorship.